Hello, John Hively here. Today, on May 19th, 2025, we're gonna cover the Medicare cuts through the back door that the Republicans are trying to push through Congress, and which President Trump calls a big, beautiful bill. Technically, they're not kicking anybody off Medicare, but they're planning on reducing Medicare by billions of dollars and then passing that on as a tax cut to the super wealthy. So let's take a look at what's really happening. Now, this is a clip from the 𝐃𝐨𝐬 and Sager and Jetty's News Hour. Actually, it lasts more than an hour, and I highly recommend it. It's a subscription-based news service. So this is what they've discovered about the Republican plan to reduce Medicaid and hand over the difference to the wealthy via tax cuts.
Let's put this up on the screen, and guys, I'm going to take my time to go through a little bit of this because this is so important. So he says, I've obtained a list of the Medicaid cuts in the Republican reconciliation package. The big one is that they're going to raise premiums and copays on beneficiaries at or above the federal poverty line. That is what helps pay for the tax cuts. And that's what he has here in this text. He says the most potentially explosive item on the menu is cost sharing above 100% of FPL, that's the federal poverty line. That appears to mean that Medicaid recipients making at or above the federal poverty line, which is $15,650 for a single individual and $21,150, so very low amounts here for a two-person household, would have to pay some money for coverage, either in premiums, copays, or hospital visits and other treatment or other fees. Currently, Medicaid gives states the option to impose out-of-pocket spending on recipients, though some populations and services like children under 18 or pregnancy care are exempted. Some premiums and enrollment fees are limited to beneficiaries above 150% of the poverty line. This policy would take that number lower. Making poor people pay more for healthcare is exactly the kind of effective cut to Medicaid that moderate Republicans have sworn they would not abide, while reducing the federal share of Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, which provides federal funding to extend Medicaid to adults under age 65 up to 138% of the poverty level in 40 states and DC is not part of the menu. This is a backdoor way of achieving something like that reduction on the backs of individuals who get Medicaid.
I cut forward here a little bit because this is exactly what this bill, what the Republicans are trying to pull. 𝐃𝐨𝐬 says it best. Take a listen.
Well, and most of the tax cut bill is just a giveaway to the rich. I mean, you are literally cutting health insurance for poor people to pay for a tax cut for the rich. That's what you're doing. And there was
some of the biggest opposition against this bill is coming straight out of the Republican Party, such as Steve Bannon and Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. Here's Josh Hawley, what he's got to say about it.
It's pushed to make potential cuts to Medicaid. In a guest essay for the New York Times, Hawley wrote in part this: Mr. Trump has promised working class tax cuts and protection for working class social insurance, such as Medicaid. But now a noisy contingent of corporatist Republicans, call it the party's Wall Street wing, is urging Congress to ignore all that and get back to the old-time religion, corporate giveaways, preferences for capital, and deep cuts to social insurance. The wing of the party wants Republicans to build our big, beautiful bill around slashing health insurance for the working poor. But that argument is both morally wrong and politically suicidal.
Well, there you have it. And according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, perhaps at least 7.1 million people are going to be kicked off of Medicaid. And another 3 million people are going to be kicked off food stamps. So the Republicans are willing to throw the poorest of Americans, of which Josh Hawley notes 64% of those on Medicaid, are working Americans. And anyway, they're just planning on doing a massive redistribution of income. So they're not really cutting the deficit at all, because they're taking the savings from throwing people off Medicaid and throwing people off SNAP, and they're giving it to the wealthy in the form of tax cuts. And just last Friday, I think that was May 16th, Moody's downgraded the U.S. debt, which has exploded. Total U.S. debt has exploded from $9 trillion in 2009-ish, 2010, to over $36 trillion today. So it's growing literally exponentially. And we went over this on yesterday's show. So the Republicans aren't really serious about at all about curbing the federal budget. Not at all. If they were, they'd be looking at military spending. But they're not. As Steve Bannon said about DOGE, if DOGE is not serious about cutting federal spending and finding waste and fraud unless they go into the military. That's what Steve Bannon said. They didn't. Instead, whatever DOGE saved for the U.S. taxpayers, if anything, went straight to the military, which now went from about $960 billion budget in 2024 last year to over $1 trillion today. So any savings that occurred is gone into military spending. Well, why doesn't anybody want to cut military spending? You would think that one of the most wasteful programs in the world, you would want to cut it if you really wanted to reduce the federal debt. But the problem with that is Medicaid recipients, and Medicare for that matter, are not profitable for rich people. Military spending is, with all of its waste, is hugely profitable if you are wealthy. And that's why they don't want to cut military spending. As Josh Hawley said, it's all about Wall Street and the same old crowd and supporting the same old tried and true stuff at the expense of working people. So let's take a look at military spending, why don't we? This is a graph from visualcapitalist.com. So you can see right here, the big blue. This is the 2024 budget, military budgets of the 15 largest militaries in the world. This is the U.S. budget, $968 billion. China down here, you know that little sliver right there? That's, I believe that's 232 billion. This blue is Russia. That's 146 billion. And notice the Russians can't even beat the freaking Ukrainians. Like they're a threat to us, right? So you notice this big blue. This big old blue. That's the United States. And it's way bigger because the thing you're going to understand, you got to understand, is that all these other nations, they happen to be allies. So you have Germany, which has an $86 billion budget. The UK, $81 billion budget. India, $74 billion budget. Saudi Arabia, $72 billion budget. France, $64 billion budget. Japan, $53 billion. South Korea, $44 billion. Australia, $368 billion. Italy, Australia, $36 billion. Italy, $35 billion. And I think this is Poland. Here, hang on, I'm going to have to move this just a little bit. I believe that's Poland. And Ukraine's up there. So that is Poland. You can see it's Poland. And then over here is Ukraine. We're basically financing their entire war effort. Well, Europe's pulling in a little bit. And there's our great nuclear ally, Israel, whose genocide of the Palestinians U.S. taxpayers are funding. So they're a really good ally. But anyway, that's some of the stuff going on right now. Why they wouldn't cut this big blue, is an amazing thing. But it's because it is profit, maximizing profit. That's why. So they always want to cut for the little guy. Couple other things I want to say here. Under the Democrats, military budgets also increase. And you'll also notice the deficits also increase under the Doesn't matter who it is, Democrat, Republican. But this is a huge bill coming through Congress where they're going to try to push millions of American citizens off Medicaid and off food stamps. After they've redistributed $65 trillion, that's the big boys, Republicans and Democratic politicians on behalf of their billionaire friends, bribers, and benefactors. After they've taken $65 trillion, according to a RAND study, from the 90% lowest income earning people since 1976, and handed it to their wealthy friends, and handed it to Wall Street. So I have a battle plan, and it's coming to fruition. I'm building the foundations of it. Probably by late summer, I'll be able to tell you what I'm doing. And so if you can share, like, and introduce my other cat here, that's Veblen. He wants to be a star, I think. He's older than dirt. But if you could share, like, and subscribe, that would be awesome. Because people need to know this, and a lot of people can't connect the dots. A lot of the others who are giving you the news aren't connecting this stuff. So anyway, have a good one. Have a good night. Have a good tomorrow. And we'll see you later. Bye.